Welcome to the WCCO Radio Black History Month Roundtable. I'm Vineeta Sawkar, and I am so pleased to delve into some topics that are very important this month and every month of the year, frankly, not just February, which is considered Black History Month. Joining us now on the John Schuster Coldwell Banker Hotline is Tru Pettigrew. He is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Cecilia Lettner. She is the Director of Inclusion and People Development with the Minnesota Twins. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us for this very important roundtable where we're going to delve into quite a few different topics. First of all, Cecilia, I'm going to start with you. When you think of historical figures, when we think of Black historical figures, what are the ones or who are the ones that resonate with you and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of folks think of, those who we know really well and show up in our classrooms most often, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. For me, I recently had a chance to go to Montgomery, Alabama, and what really stood out to me is those whose names we don't know, right? Those who are doing the work, who maybe didn't have the camera time, who are still showing up and trying to register to vote, who, I think we talk about Rosa Parks quite a lot, but folks don't always remember Claudette Colvin. And she was 15 years old, and she was the first person who refused to give up her seat to a white woman. So a lot of times when we think of education and Black history, those are the names that sometimes get missed in the conversation, but they carried out so much of the work, the heavy lift. And for me, those are the folks that have left the biggest inspiration and impact on me.
I'd love to hear a little bit more, Cecilia, about your trip that you just went on, you said.
Yeah, it was a trip that a number of our executive officers here at the Minnesota Twins were able to go on in partnership with the Pollad companies and the Center for Economic Inclusion. And it was, I think, just a reminder of how much history we have that we don't get taught in school. And it was so impactful to remember those who were doing the work, like I was mentioning, and those who just were not remembered or not spoken about as often, and that they lend their voice to these causes, and that they actually were pushing these things across the finish line. They were doing it without the desire of being notarized or being remembered and recognized. And it was such an emotional and one of I would say a life impacting type of experience to go on. Even just the reminder that we have history here in Minnesota, up in Duluth, that we don't often talk about. It kind of stays to the South. And so it was a really great experience.
Oh my gosh, it sounds life-changing. And yes, I've been to that monument in Duluth, what you're talking about what happened there. And sometimes we do just think it's the South, but it's not. Tru, give us your perspective on historical figures in Black history that really have resonated with you, that have impacted what you do.
No, absolutely. Similar to Cecilia, one of the standouts to me is Dr. King, right? I think one of the most notable historical figures in Black history, and largely because of the resiliency that he showed in the midst of adversity, and not just in the midst of adversity from his white counterparts that opposed him, but even within the Black community, for the people who he was fighting for to achieve equity and inclusion and rights. But he stayed focused on the greater purpose of creating a world where it was much more inclusive and much more equitable for those that were being oppressed. And there's something about that level of commitment and resilience to stay on purpose that really resonates with me and inspires me to do the work that I do. But then there are other people, that have done the same thing. I think of Maya Angelou and Rosa Parks that you mentioned. I also think about people like Muhammad Ali, right? Very prominent and heroic figure, and someone that I draw inspiration from for similar reasons that I just shared about Dr. King. But then there are some of the unsung heroes, like a Major James Capers, who was the first African-American to lead a Marine recon unit in our U.S. military, that probably one of the most accomplished and decorated military heroes that none of us know about. And again, he did it during a time where he had to do it in the face of so much adversity. And so recognizing the people that Cecilia talked about that were in the fight that did not get the recognition that many of the notable figures have received, I think is just important for us to remember and recognize, because we stand on those shoulders as well.
That's so true. True. I'm curious, do you get a little frustrated? And I you can both be honest. I'll ask you this too, Cecilia, when everyone swoops in February and says, oh, we got to focus on Black history because it's Black History Month, when really we should be integrating so much of this into our education year round for all of us, for students. What are your thoughts on this focus in February? And do you think it takes away from the fact or is a good thing? Or Tru, give me your honest opinion.
No, my honest opinion is I do find it interesting, right? And to me, as I think about purpose again, and I will point out another notable figure in Black history, and ironically enough, one that we should all know, but many of us don't know because he's the very reason we are celebrating Black History Month, is Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who is the founder and the godfather of Black History Month, which actually started as Negro History Week in 1926. And then became Black History Month under President Gerald Ford in 1976. But Dr. Woodson created it because he realized there was a need to integrate the accomplishments and achievements of great Blacks throughout America into American history. As a well-accomplished historian himself who studied history in some of the highest academic institutions of our nation, Harvard, Chicago University, and others, realized that for someone who is studying history as a historian, he did not hear the stories of Blacks that made significant contributions to this country. So the very purpose of why he created Black History Week, which is now Black History Month, was so that the accomplishments and achievements of Blacks could become a part of American history and the narrative in a very seamless and integrated way. And so I find it interesting that the very purpose for why it was created, we still haven't quite gotten it right.
It's so true. And Cecilia, what's your perspective? Because it's like everyone talks about it in February and then March 1st comes and it's like, hello, why are we not talking about this anymore? What's your perspective?
Yeah, it's important for the recognition, what it was created for. And I lean into it to make sure that we are talking about it and recognizing it. But it is very much, hey, Black history is American history. And so let's be talking about this throughout the year, right? Let's celebrate accomplishments throughout the year as they're happening, because I think we also think Black history and we think back, right? But there's a lot of Black history that's happening right now. Our first Black women being elected to our state Senate. There's things that are happening every day, and this is history. It's Black history, but it's our history as a whole. So while it's great, and I love that we can celebrate us during this month, I love being able to point that out and looking at the intersectionality of the other months of recognition that we have, right? As we go into women's history and as we go into June with the celebration of Pride, finding those places that it is us as a community, us as a country, for us to recognize and celebrate each other.
That's so true. Having a great discussion with Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer from the Minnesota Timberwolves, Tru Pettigrew, and Cecilia Lettner, who's the Director of Inclusion and People Development with the Minnesota Twins. This is the WCCO Radio Black History Month Roundtable. Next, I want to ask them what their organizations are doing within the Black community, the general community, to educate people, to reach out this month and every month of the year. We'll be back with this conversation on the WCCO Radio Black History Month Roundtable. We're having a great discussion here for the WCCO Radio Black History Month Roundtable. I'm Vineeta Sawkar. Thank you so much for joining us as we continue this discussion with Tru Pettigrew with the Minnesota Timberwolves and Cecilia Lettner with the Minnesota Twins. When I think of both of your organizations, you do a lot in the community. both organizations do a lot. Cecilia, is there something specific that the Minnesota Twins do well as far as reaching out to the Black community, educating people, doing what you do in leading their efforts? What would you like to highlight as far as what the Twins do in this community related to diversity?
Yeah, there's a lot that we're doing. And I think one of the great things that our community engagement team is doing is bringing the sport of baseball to the community, and engaging in our North Minneapolis areas and through our RBI program, and just engaging the children, our parents, who, we might have seen a drop off in some representation in our fan base over the years. But here in Minnesota, taking that effort and having the conversations, what is baseball? How do you play baseball? Hey, come to the ballpark and have some fun. It's really been a lot of excitement since I've joined. Also engaging with our employees, right? Our employees are our community. They know our community the best, and leaning in with their connections. We have some great connections over at North High with some of our staff, bringing them to the ballpark, going through tours, and also working on our connections with groups and how we're doing our hiring. That you don't have to be a baseball player to come and work at the Minnesota Twins, and that you can come and follow your career, whether it's in finance or analytics or what have you. That's kind of one of the big barriers that I think we see. But in having that conversation, it also brings the love of the sport back to the community as well. So it's a effort that I love how we collaborate on, from on field to off field for our employees and our community as a whole. Our Twins Community Fund giving back dollars into our community and putting the if you will, the power behind the dollars, putting it towards efforts that are having an impact. And we can see that impact has been a really great personal satisfaction, I think, as I work closely with that group.
That's great. Tru, what about you? I know all the different events you do diversity related with the Wolves as far as nights. You talk about Black History Month night or whatever it is, or Pride night, that type of thing. What are some other efforts that the Wolves really focus on this month and year round?
Yeah, well, this month and year round, and I'm glad you pointed the year round piece out because that's something we take a lot of pride in. And we have our own in-house foundation. It's called the Fast Break Foundation. And we intentionally partner with organizations that represent the most vulnerable members of our population. And unfortunately, in the state of Minnesota, that happens to be Black people that are on the receiving end of the greatest levels of inequities and disparities, whether those be disparities through health outcomes or public safety or household income or home ownership, right? And so we make sure we partner with organizations that are, and funding organizations that are contributing to those areas of disparity. We work with one of our corporate partners, Pentair, where we regularly host a program that we call career development training camps, where we are working specifically with Black and Brown young people, students, to help equip them with the tools necessary to achieve long-term success and sustainability in their career choices. Another one of our partners is Stackwell, which is a financial app that helps to educate people in the Black community, specifically in the Black community, on how to close the wealth gap, because it is one of the largest wealth gaps in the nation that exists in the state of Minnesota. And so Stackwell is a platform that is specifically focused on helping them understand how to invest their money and giving them starter funds in an effort to help enhance their financial literacy, but also providing them with resources to be able to do so, to grow that money. So there are a number of things that we're doing. And even in-house, we facilitate, we do it this month, we do it every month, but this month the focus is going to be on ways that as an organization, we can help elevate lives of the members of our Black community. So we'll be hosting a facilitated dialogue with our law enforcement leaders within the city of Minneapolis and across Hennepin County to understand some of the things they're already doing to build bridges of trust and understanding between law enforcement and the Black community, and also understanding what role we can play to support in the building of those bridges.
So when you think of what life was like after George Floyd was murdered and all the upheaval that happened. Do you feel like we've made progress at all since then? I'll start with you, Cecilia.
Ooh, it's a heavy question. I think that when we were in the moment, right, the spotlight was on us to be better. We saw organizations making commitments, donating dollars to it, to being better in representation and supporting of the Black communities. I think as we have continued to move further away from the George Floyd murder, we see some momentum being lost. I would say there's still a commitment, but I think there's also there's something to point to, right, of that we are losing momentum, whereas before perhaps it was a little bit easier to slide back in efforts or put things to the side, but now people are continuing to ask, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? That's kind of the plus side almost of so many companies and individuals coming out and making public statements of support and commitment to be better, is that people can point to it and say, you said you were going to do this, where are you at? And so while we might not, the momentum might have slowed down, I think we are seeing progress, but I would be remiss if I didn't say we still have a lot of work to do.
How about you, Tru? What's your perspective on this?
It's very similar to Cecilia's. I would say, yes, we are seeing progress, but we should not get comfortable and rest on our laurels, because I do see a lot of organizations that have made promises and commitments getting to a place of comfort where they feel like they may not have to be as intentional or as assertive or as aggressive in delivering on those promises. Where I am encouraged is having people like Cecilia and then others that are part of a network of accountability partners that are in positions of power and influence that look like Cecilia and myself, whether it's a Greg Cunningham, a Damon Jenkins, a Amelia Hardy, a Kiera Fernandez, right? And so people across all of these different organizations, and we have a number of Fortune 500s in the Twin Cities. So it's encouraging to see Black people in a lot of these influential leadership roles. And so I think a lot of that has occurred since the murder of George Floyd, with the elevation of Black people in these influential leadership roles, particularly in the DEI space. And so now I think it's incumbent upon us to hold each other accountable for holding our respective organizations accountable for not letting our foot off of the gas pedal, so that we can ensure we are achieving the change that we want to see.
Tru, I'm going to give each of you a minute. Tru, your biggest hope?
My biggest hope is that we get to a point where we are looking at everything that we do through an equity lens, recognizing that we can have good intentions, but can still result in unintended consequences if we don't take the time to ask ourselves the question, is the decision that we're about to make going to lend an unfair advantage to any one specific people group over another, or is it going to create a bigger hurdle for any one specific people group over another? I don't think it's too complicated of a thing to do. Just take the time to look at everything that we do through an equity lens to ensure we are creating a more equitable world.
How about you, Cecilia? Your hope?
Yeah, very similar. Pausing to think as we're making decisions in the business, is there a group that this is going to hurt, versus just focusing on what our hope and outcome is. I also, biggest hope is to have more folks take some of that individual accountability, right? To learn and to listen and to take action. I heard a saying the other day, and it's just kind of continued to resonate with me, is that nobody can do everything, but anybody can do something. And so it's going to take all of us to take these efforts in trying to bring more equity and justice to the table and through our thought process and our decisions, but not to rely on folks who are leading in this space, such as myself or Tru, to help push that forward, to take some of that accountability as well and raise their voices and bring their voice into the choir, if you will, and leading these efforts and making the changes that we need to have made.
It's a wonderful discussion talking to both of you. Tru and Cecilia, thank you so much for joining us. Next, we are talking to Henry Lake, my colleague from WCCO Radio, as well as Shayla Reaves from WCCO TV. What is the responsibility of the media in further progressing these changes and the way the Black community is viewed. We'll talk to them next. We're continuing our conversation here on WCCO Radio for Black History Month Roundtable. We had a great discussion for the first half hour. Now we're continuing it with my colleague, Henry Lake from WCCO Radio. Good to see you, Henry.
Always nice to see you and be with you, Vineeta.
It's awesome. We're also live on Facebook as well as Twitter, our WCCO Radio accounts. So you can watch this as well and listen. And also joining us is someone I'm just getting the opportunity to meet is Shayla Reaves from WCCO TV. Hello, Shayla. So nice of you to join us.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
That's so great. Well, first off, I want to ask you, Shayla, when you think of historical figures and the impact that they've had on your life, when you think of Black History Month, who tops the list for you?
Well, automatically, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I know we talk about him every year, but that dream that he had, his I Have a Dream speech, it's so aspirational. And even though we're almost 60 years since he delivered that speech, I feel that we as a country are still working and striving to live up to the words he shared so long ago. While we've made some progress, I feel that, there are still many steps in many areas where we can still make progress. But Black history is American history. And we always have another opportunity to try to get it right.
That's so true. Henry, when you think of historical figures and the impact they've had on your life, what comes to mind?
Well, I have to piggyback and start with Martin Luther King Jr. the same way that Shayla started with him, just because he was so impactful. He was so influential. I wanted to be a Morehouse man because of him and others like him. That was my dream school. And so I definitely would start with Martin Luther King Jr. But when I think about us on the journey to equality and freedom, there's so many ways in different ways of thinking about how do we get there, right? And so Martin Luther King Jr. thought about bringing people together and talked about doing it in a peaceful way. But I also think about Malcolm X and how Malcolm X was a more controversial figure because he says, no, I know that getting to freedom and equality is not going to be an easy thing. And a lot of people aren't going to want to give it up. And so I feel like African Americans have to take their freedom from the masses that don't want us to be successful. You think about the Black Panther Party and what they brought to the table in terms of wanting to educate, also feed individuals in their community. And they were a very controversial group. So there are a lot of different people and groups and institutions and organizations that have talked about equality and freedom, but not necessarily does everybody kind of go about it the same way.
That's so true. When you think about it, Shayla, we do these roundtables, we get everyone together. We're like Black History Month, February, yay. Why are we not doing this year round? Why are students? I mean, I think of way back when my own education, I didn't hear about a lot of Black figures in history besides Martin Luther King Jr. Do you think it's getting any better? And do you think we need to broaden this focus?
Speaking to my experience, just in my short time in the Twin Cities, I've only been here a couple of years, but based on the experience that I'm having here and what I've seen here, just with the company that I work for, you're seeing more of a focus on community and the stories that I have wanted to tell my entire career. I'm getting support to tell those stories now. And we're not just telling them in February, we're telling them year round. And I think it's really helping to build and strengthen relationships with communities of color right here in the Twin Cities, because people are able to turn on the news and see people that they know and have known for years in their neighborhood on television, showcasing their area of expertise, whatever their passion might be it helping kids in the community, be it a restaurant. There is a home for it in a way that I have not personally experienced throughout my career. I know just in the short time that I've been here, I've had a chance to cover Nita Kellogg and her Project Diva and how she's making a difference for kids. Tito Wilson and his Wilson's Image Barber Scholarship Program that's helping kids on the North Side get to college. Jamil Jackson and his CEO Center for Change program. Marcel Hofger, who was previously struggled with addiction. Now he's in a position where he's able to give second chances to others who are once where he was. So there's so much incredible work happening here, and to be, as a journalist, supported to tell those stories to our audience. I think it helps people see that we care. We don't just show up when there's crimes and fires and shootings. We want to know what's happening in your community outside of there. For Valentine's Day this year, I had a chance, we could have gone to any florist, but I remember I was talking to my producer and I said, let's go to, is there a Black florist? Is there a BIPOC florist that we can highlight in our show? And so we found Miss Carolyn Smaller with Bouquets by Carolyn. She's been in St. Paul for her entire life, in business for decades. People have been posting in my comments since I went and made flowers with her on Valentine's Day. She made the flowers for my wedding, or she made the flowers for this moment. But just to be able to turn on the television and see those people that you value, that have been a part of your life story on television, just sharing their art and their craft, and to know that there's a place for you in a news space in a way that I don't feel news has always over the years treated some of their stories as being newsworthy. It's been helpful in building relationships in the community, because people see, oh, Miss Carolyn was on, or, oh, this person I knew down the street. Maybe it's worth my time to let that station know what I'm working on. Maybe there's a space and a chance and an opportunity for me too, where before maybe they didn't always feel that way. But now we're giving people a reason to watch, because they are starting to feel, I feel from the conversations that I have, that there is a place for them, what they're doing in news, that we care, and that I work personally through the stories that I get to do to highlight the humanity of people in communities of color, to highlight the places where, no matter what part of town you're living in, you can find connection. Maybe you don't live in North Minneapolis, but maybe you can relate to the idea of being a parent who wants to go the extra mile for your kid. And now you're creating an opportunity to help other families do the same through a scholarship program. And so no matter what part of town you're in, you don't have to live in North Minneapolis to know what it feels like to be that parent. And so looking for those little nuggets, those little places where people can feel connected to each other. It sometimes is that spark that says, oh, I didn't know that business was there. Maybe I should go support them. Oh, I didn't know that here. Maybe I can go and enroll my child in that program. It's really introducing people to their neighbors through storytelling.
That's huge. It's huge. I think it's so wonderful to hear that, Shayla, coming from you. And Henry, do you feel like you have that latitude on your show in the evenings? I listen to you. You tackle so many topics. Do you feel like that's getting better?
I'm not sure that it's actually getting better. Do I have the latitude to do it? Absolutely. And you know where my heart is about all issues, right? That impact the African-American community, all communities. But I think that, one of the things and one of the signs of us getting better and moving forward is when the onus isn't on me or Shayla to report on things, right? Like when it's a person of color, of course, it's going to come across as authentic and genuine. But I think that all reporters should be discussing some of the issues and some of the tough challenges that are happening in our community. People say all the time that Black history is American history. Then that means that we all need to be talking about it, right? I think that in many ways, right now in the current climate in the United States of America, in some way, shape, or form, we're taking steps back. Ron DeSantis and what he's doing in Florida is a travesty to this entire country, and the banning of certain books in different communities, not just in Florida, but in other states as well. So, once we get into a point where most reporters are talking about these stories in the way that me and Shayla Reaves are, then I'll feel a lot better about the progress that we're making.
I love that perspective. Great conversation here with Henry Lake and Shayla Reaves. We'll continue in just a moment on the WCCO Radio Black History Month Roundtable. Next, we'll talk to them a little bit about life after the murder of George Floyd here in the Twin Cities. What still needs to be done? The conversation continues. We are continuing our conversation here on WCCO Radio and live on Facebook as well as Twitter. This is our Black History Month Roundtable. A fascinating discussion right now with Henry Lake from WCCO Radio and Shayla Reaves from WCCO TV. Henry, we know what life was like here during the riots after George Floyd was murdered, and all the promises that were made by corporations, individuals. We're going to understand. We're going to do better. And here we are, almost 3 years later. Are we doing better? You talked a little bit about that in the last segment, but are we doing better, and what still needs to be done?
That's kind of a complex question. Are we doing better? I think society as a whole saw what happened with the murder of George Floyd. And I think for a moment, and I want to reiterate a moment, I think a lot of people thought and reflected and thought about how can we get better and be better and do better. And I think that we missed the mark on that moment because it shouldn't be just a moment. It should be something that we should never forget, and that we should move forward with the intention of we are going to be a better country. Quite frankly, police brutality has gotten worse. If you've paid attention in the last year and you see some of the stories, and we just seen just recently the Tyree Nichols situation in Memphis, Tennessee. It's utterly heartbreaking, and we're seeing so many different stories. We're seeing so many more videos now. It's almost like we've learned nothing from the George Floyd situation. Do I think that there are a lot of corporations and companies that in the moment pledged to give more money to African American owned businesses, BIPOC businesses, to develop a better relationship, create more awareness about the needs and the disadvantages? Absolutely. But we're seeing a lot of that money dry up. For what? I don't think that the entire moment is past us, because we shouldn't look at it as just a blimp on the radar. We should be very, very intentional about creating a situation of a better tomorrow for all of us.
Shayla, you weren't here during May of 2020, but you joined WCCO TV several months later, December later that year. Were you apprehensive at all about coming to this community? What were your impressions from afar? And you shared a little bit about how you feel like you get more latitude at your job, but what's your perspective coming from the outside into the Twin Cities after everything this community has been through?
Well, I was like everyone else, watching around the world as things unfolded. And I try to be, I would say at this time in my life, I've tried to be a little bit more intentional about where am I going? Why am I going there? Why am I making this decision or that decision? And so in my decision to come here, I thought about the things that have followed me throughout my career. No matter what city I've been in, the two things that have followed me are people like to talk to you. And if I have to learn sad news, I want to learn it from you. I think the latter part, as I continue to work as a journalist, that becomes more and more clear. And I think that comes from people needing to feel, if I'm sharing my pain, sharing what I'm going through, sharing what's difficult for me, I want to know that I can trust you with my story. I want to feel that you are sincere. And I think that just how I show up in the world, that provides comfort to get some of those conversations going that maybe, people may be apprehensive about having. And so thinking about that, thinking about the murder of George Floyd, I personally believe that the specific things that I do well that have followed me throughout my career would make a difference in a community like this one at a time like now. Because I look at myself as a place for stories to land. And maybe someone feels comfortable reaching out to me in a way that maybe they may not feel comfortable reaching out to another colleague. But if I'm a place for someone's story to land, that's more stories that the station has an opportunity to know about, to consider coverage, and another opportunity to build a relationship. And I feel that those specific things, talking to people, being that safe space for a story to land, would help create bridge building at a time like now.
Henry, when you think of the broader community, what are things that people can do as they're listening to this roundtable? They want to support. They want to do something that has an impact. Sometimes people just don't know what to do. What do you see as things that you suggest? And as you said, it's not your responsibility or Shayla's responsibility, but maybe you have suggestions for people on ways to be better and to support the Black community.
I think that, with anything, you should try to go make a genuine, authentic connection in various different communities that you want to have an impact on. It's one thing to say that, you support the LGBT community, but you don't really know anybody in the community, or I'm saying, you don't never connect with an organization that supports the cause. I think that specifically, if you're talking about wanting to be more proactive about helping, kids of color or the plight of African Americans or people on the North Side, go and be authentic about connecting with people that can give you information and you can learn about the experience yourself. Unfortunately, I have friends, white friends, in local media, or just have done some work in media, that I don't feel like their relationships are authentic. And when I say authentic, it's not because your colleague that's in the industry is Black, or an athlete on the Minnesota Vikings or the Minnesota Timberwolves that's Black. I'm talking about real people that you can touch and feel and have conversations with. People that live in North Minneapolis, or people that live in South St. Paul, or wherever. Because to me, knowing somebody via social media or knowing somebody because of an industry, but not anybody truly in a community, to me, that's a very different way of knowing people. That's not truly acknowledging the people that you should be trying to get a hold of or you want to know.
Really important points. Shayla, your hope, just in general, give us in about a minute, your hope.
My hope for the Twin Cities community, I would say, is that people continue to be open-minded, take the time to get to know someone who doesn't look like you. Invest in an experience that may grow your kids or teach them about something that they're not familiar with, because there's so many dynamic people here in this community doing incredible work that would be more than excited to share their story and their experience. And sometimes you have to get outside of your comfort zone to grow. And there's so many people that are willing to take your hand and say, like, hey, you want to grow? Here's what I'm doing. Come be a part of my organization. Come share in my experience. And you don't have to do it by yourself. I think the beauty in what we do as storytellers is we introduce people to their neighbors. And so every time we have a chance to go to a community, tell that story about that florist, Miss Carolyn, and the work she's been doing for over 30 years, tell the story of Tito Wilson and how he's creating a scholarship program. All of these are access points, both to support a business, to support kids and the next generation. There are entry points like them, other organizations that are out there, the Doorstep Foundation, Andre Debonair McNeil and Dr. Zakiya Robbins McNeil, Project Diva. There's so many ways that you can get involved, and so many people doing incredible work that would love to see you come through the door, sit down for a meal, have a conversation. And everybody has to eat.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yes.
It's so true. It's a good point. Henry,
Yeah.
a minute. Give me your hope.
First off, I want to continue to learn, because I think that we all can continue to learn regardless of your age. And with that learning, I want to be able to go out and educate others, right? And share the wisdom, share the knowledge that I have. And then once that happens, and I want people to be able to do that with me as well, right? Like share their wisdom and their knowledge. When we start doing that and sharing the information, and we continue to learn about one another, I think that we finally get to that point of where Dr. Martin Luther King is talking about in society, and us, that's like part of the dream, right? Of us being together. So, if I can learn a lot more, continue to grow, then I think that all of us, not as a community here or in the state of Minnesota, but as a country and as a world, we can continue to heal and be a better world for each and every one of us.
Important words from both of you. Thank you so much. Shayla Reaves, Henry Lake, great discussion. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vineeta.
You bet. And thank you so much to all of our listeners for listening to WCCO Radio's Black History Month Roundtable. Have a good evening.